Hello there and welcome along. In this pruning tutorial I'm going to be talking you through the basic principles of how to work on a tree or standard rose. The main thing to bear in mind if you're pruning a tree or standard rose is the fact that the plant normally has two grafts, which brings together actually three different plants. You'll never find a rose that's been grown as a standard or a tree rose without at least two graft points. First of all, you have the growth that's actually in the ground, the rootstock of the plant itself, which then has a graft point at ground level, adding to it the stem. Normally a variety that grows very, very quickly and looks completely different to the grafted rose that's actually on the top of the plant. At the top of the stem, that's normally around 3 to 4 feet tall, you'll then have a second graft point, and that is the actual rose that you purchased. And we treat this very much like we would do if you were pruning a shrub or bush rose that was growing at ground level. Again, very quickly touching base with the principles of pruning to make sure that you have all the equipment to hand as soon as you're ready to prune. I always like to work with a large bucket and cut the pruning up into the bucket to make sure they don't fall on the floor and bite me at another time. You're going to need some gloves. I'm preferring these lighter weight ones made of recycled bamboo and plastic, which have a lot of dexterity in them to make sure I can move my hands whilst I'm pruning. You're obviously going to need your sharpened, lubricated and cleaned secateurs as well. This job is a little bit fussy, so you want to make sure that these are nice and sharp and cleaned and ready to hand, ready to go. This is something that I wanted to jump into the board and quickly clear away before you guys saw it. However, it's a really good training exercise. You can see one of my standard tree roses just here with the graft and union point at the top of the stem, the grafted stem down to the ground containing the grafted rootstock actually in the ground itself. And you can see here a really, really strong leader that was actually forgotten and missed by myself, stretching high up into the sky from last year. Leaders like this that are actually coming off of the stem or from anywhere other than the graft point and above at the top of the actual stem itself need to be removed. These will actually draw a huge amount of nutrient value and sap out of the plant, tiring out the actual grafted rose itself. Often much more vigorous type of rose grafted to the actual stem. So these need to be removed really cleanly right down at ground level. Now that growth has been removed, you can now very clearly see the clear stem on the plant, leaving us to do our normal pruning at the top of this particular rose. Incidentally, while we're talking about it, when a standard rose or tree rose is delivered to you, it normally comes with a wooden stake, which I normally actually remove immediately and replace it with a sight pin. These steel sight pins are much narrower, thinner, much more discreet, and what I do is I tie my roses on with a piece of wire and an old piece of hose pipe wrapped around them to protect the stems and stop them from rocking. I've just found over a period of years that if you rely on the wooden stakes, they rapidly collapse and your plant will end up on the floor. So I tend to replace all of my standard and tree roses with the stakes that they come with a metal sight pin just as soon as they're delivered. So now that large piece of suckering growth has been removed from the stem, we can actually move on to actually cutting back the stems at the top of the graft and union point itself and form a nice well-balanced shrub. Depending on your variety, depending on how you need to cut it back, this particular one is really leggy and produces growth 5, 6, sometimes onto 7 feet from the actual top of the graft point. So I tend to cut it back quite firmly. Once again, as with a bush or a shrub rose, we want to be removing the dead, the diseased, the dying and the crossing growth first. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So a nice clean sharp pair of secateurs, simply going to remove any dead wood that we've got. I mean, these are only little tiny bits, but I want to remove them completely from the plant. And it's amazing just as soon as you start removing certain bits, how much light and space you can actually open up into the plant. And you can almost see the woods for the trees. I'm just going to throw those into the bucket. We're then going to look at actually opening up like we would do a shrub or a bush rose, the middle of the plant itself, and take away any stems that are heading right into the middle of the plant like this one here. Don't know if you can see that, but this one here is growing back into the center of the plant. Luckily, I've got a nice outward facing bud, which is going to bring the growth back towards me and away from you guys. So I'm simply going to use my secateurs, same as we would do if we were trimming a bush or a shrub rose, keeping the secateurs at a nice 35 to 45 degree angle to make sure that water runs off that cut, selecting an outward facing bud to once again make sure the middle of the plant is nice and open. Once again, I've got a stem that's moving back into the center of the plant here. Again, a nice 45-degree cut bud at the top, removing that stem. I'm going to work my way around these other stems and just cut them back so it looks nice and tidy. Again, selecting nice, strong, outward-facing buds. I've got to try and get my hands, it's quite difficult doing this, I've got to try and get my hands in at the right angles. I'm going to play that back and I'm going to be doing all of this kind of thing. Right. Working our way through, opening up the center of the plant, selecting strong outward facing buds, nice angled cuts. Again, this stem is actually causing a little bit of congestion, but I've got an outward facing bud here and a little bit of dead wood that I've actually missed here, so I'm going to actually remove the dead wood first, like that. It's a little untidy, but some of these things sometimes aren't actually ideal. Again, I've got to try and get the secateurs in there. I've got an outward facing bud just here, which is going to go back towards you, so alleviating the problems there. Working our way methodically around the plant. Don't forget, you can always go back and you can take some more off if you wanted to. You can't ever put it back on, so if you are in any doubt whatsoever, just move away from the plant, take a step back and have a look at it, see how it balances up. One last cut to make, and there she is, almost done. I'm just going to put these bits into the bucket and we're going to have a good look over it and see what it looks like. Now, I've actually got a matching pair of these, one in each side of a kidney-shaped border, so I always like to try and keep them wherever possible a similar sort of shape. So I always make sure I step back and have a good look. A little weak stem just there, which is just going to nip that back, but I think that's pretty much done. So very, very similar to the same principles as you would be working with a shrub or a bush road. Make sure you remove the dead, the disease, the dying and the crossing growth first. Open up the center of that plant so you've got plenty of light and air. Take out any crossing stems and then work your way round the canopy, selecting outward facing buds and making sure you're keeping your cuts at nice 35 to 45 degree angles to make sure the water runs off of those. If you have any questions about pruning standard or tree roses, don't hesitate to drop me a comment, and look out for further tutorials from myself on pruning, climbing and rambling roses and young plants that should be left towards the very, very end of pruning season. I will see you all again very soon. Take good care now. Bye-bye.